Hi everyone. So this is just a little bit of an additional help to some of you that are confused with spermatogenesis and oogenesis. I wanted to give you an extra video to help you understand these processes that are in itself complicated. So it's okay if you're confused. So hopefully I can just clarify a couple of doubts. This image, I think, gives you a very good broad idea of oogenesis and spermatogenesis and how they're different. Okay, know that both oogenesis and spermatogenesis are going to begin with a germ cell, a spermatogonia, or a oogonium, but it's not signified here because the minute that it actually becomes a primary spermatocyte or a primary oocyte, that's when the true oogenesis or spermatogenesis will begin. That's when you will differentiate into either sperm cell or you will differentiate either into an ovum. So what's going to happen is that in males are always going to have that germ cell, that oogonium, before the primary oocytes, and they're always going to have an endless supply of these oogonium, and that's why they can create an endless supply of primary spermatocytes through mitosis, and that's also why they can create an endless supply of sperm through meiosis. In females, it's a little bit different because the oogonia that they originally had, they all became primary oocytes before the female was even born. So they don't have this supply of germ cells like males do. They actually only have primary oocytes, and every month, after puberty, where some of those primary oocytes will become secondary oocytes, and then if fertilized will become an egg, an ovum, the female will decrease in the quantity of primary oocytes she has each month, which means at some point she will no longer have primary oocytes, so she will lose the capacity to produce egg cells, which means she has hit menopause and she's no longer fertile. So that's one of the differences. Males will have these spermatogonium for the rest of their lives. Females don't have them anymore the minute that they're born. All of them are now primary oocytes, so they don't have any germ cells, so they don't have an endless supply of eggs to be produced. Okay, so that's the first thing. Second thing, if you can see here, the primary spermatocyte, after going through meiosis 2, will become a meiosis 1 will become a secondary spermatocyte. So primary spermatocyte goes through meiosis 1, becomes secondary spermatocyte. So that's a division. So now you have two new cells, two secondary spermatocytes. And then they go through meiosis 2 to become 4 new cells. These cells, hopefully you know what they're called. They're called spermatids. And these spermatids will then just mature, which means they will grow a functional tail to become the sperm. So if you can see here, from one primary spermatocyte, we're creating 4 sperm cells. In oogenesis, that's a little bit different. The primary oocyte will go through meiosis 1, will finish meiosis 1, and it will also create 2 cells. But only one of those cells will actually become a secondary oocyte, while the other cell becomes a non-functional cell called a polar body. So it's just disregarded. This isn't used. Okay, now that secondary oocyte will be ovulated. I'm going to show you what that is in a second. And it's going to just await for sperm. If the sperm actually does meet this secondary oocyte, a process called fertilization occurs where the sperm meets the secondary oocyte. The secondary oocyte finishes in that same second. It finishes meiosis 2. So remember, it's another division, so that means it creates 1 cell, non-functional polar body cell that is just disregarded. And the other cell has developed from a secondary oocyte to a ovum, a mature ovum, that is now merging with the sperm to create this new cell called a zygote. And this cell that is now part sperm, part egg, so it has the DNA of the sperm, it has the DNA of the egg, will be the cell that can grow into a baby and a human being. Okay, so that's just very briefly oogenesis and spermatogenesis and how they differ. Now let's look at oogenesis in the actual reproductive organ, which is the ovary. So this is one of the ovaries. Females have 2, one in the right and one in the left side of their body. Each month, one of the ovaries, either right or left, is going to take turns producing egg cell that is going to wait to see if it's fertilized. So what happens is that this tiny little cell over here is when the female was a fetus, This tiny little cell over here was the oogonium that before the female was even born, it differentiated into a primary oocyte. So it went through mitosis and a little bit of meiosis 1 to create these cells. So when a female is born, she only has these cells. She no longer has the oogonium. She only has these primary oocytes. And then when the female is around 13, 14, or 15 years old, the female will go through puberty. So some of these primary oocytes will begin the process of meiosis, will finish meiosis 1, and will become a secondary oocyte. And if you can see, these little tiny cells are surrounded by a sac of fluid that grows larger and larger and larger as the oocyte develops. So here the primary oocyte is inside this follicle, and as it develops into a secondary oocyte, the follicle becomes larger until the point where the follicle is so large it gets very close to the edge of the ovary and actually breaks the edge of the ovary, allowing that secondary oocyte to exit the ovary. And once the secondary oocyte exits the ovary, it's actually going to enter another organ called the fallopian tubes. So these are the fallopian tubes. You have also one in the right and one in the left. So the secondary oocyte enters the fallopian tubes and is going to try to meet sperm in the fallopian tubes. Now, if the sperm actually does get to the area where the secondary oocyte is, it's going to come into contact with that secondary oocyte. So the secondary oocyte is really quickly going to finish meiosis 2. So it releases one of the polar bodies, becomes an ovum, and with the sperm, they both merge together to create a zygote, a cell that could potentially become a baby. Okay, so that's oogenesis, super, super, super fast. Let's look at spermatogenesis. If you want to see spermatogenesis, well, the reproductive organ where it occurs are the testes, the testicles. Inside the testes, there's going to be these seminiferous tubules. So there are these tubes that are super coiled up or super condensed inside the testes. And in each one of these tubes, you can see it here, you're going to have spermatogenesis. And it's going to move from the outside of the tube. So the process is moving from the outside of the tube towards the inside of the tube where there's a hollow space. So this hollow space is where the mature sperm are going to just concentrate or store until ejaculation occurs. Okay, so if we want to see spermatogenesis, remember that spermatogenesis will start off with a spermatogonium, this germ cell that will go through mitosis. One of the cells after mitosis will remain a spermatogonium, while the other one will become a primary spermatocyte that is already destined to become a sperm. So this primary spermatocyte will move deeper into the tube, into the seminiferous tube, and go through meiosis 1 to become a secondary spermatocyte. The secondary spermatocyte goes through meiosis 2 to become a spermatid. So here, it's pretty much genetically already a sperm. The only thing that it's missing is a little tail. So then the spermatid will mature to become a full mature sperm cell with a tail, with a head, and with a midpiece. And then these sperm that have the ability to swim are going to be ready to meet the egg in the fallopian tubes if they so choose, if they have the ability to do it, okay, if there's ejaculation and there's fertilization. So that's pretty much spermatogenesis and oogenesis, and hopefully that was helpful. Please let me know if you have any questions.